Scadutree Fragments act as your way to level up your character in the Elden Ring DLC, so they become vitally important for tackling further regions and bosses. In this guide, I'll explain exactly where each fragment is and how to reach them in a nice and concise manner. I'll be organizing this video by map region, but please bear in mind that you could very easily accidentally spoil yourself. So, let's begin. The first two Scadutree Fragments can be found at the Church of Consolation. Simply take a right from the starting Gravesite Plain Site of Grace and head eastward and downhill to find the church. You'll find both Scadutree Fragments at the Statue of Marika. Scadutree Fragment number 3 is also hanging out right by the starting area and can be found right by the Scorched Ruins Site of Grace. To get here, head north from the Gravesite Plain Site of Grace, and then north past the Scorched Ruins to reach the Site of Grace. Next, head east to the graveyard and you'll find a pot-bearing shadow enemy. Defeat him and he'll drop your Scadutree Fragment. Just past the very first Furnace Golem, you'll find the 3-path cross Site of Grace, along with the NPCs Freya and Hornsent. This is the very first Miquella Cross you'll find, which means you'll also be finding a Scadutree Fragment alongside of it. Head west from the 3-path cross Site of Grace, underneath the arch, and you'll come across yet another Miquella Cross and the main gate cross Site of Grace, along with the NPCs Sir Ansbach and more. Here you'll find your 5th Scadutree Fragment. From the 3-path cross Site of Grace, once you cross underneath the arch towards the main gate, instead of heading up to the main gate, you can instead turn left and travel up the side of the cliff. This will take you to the Cliffroad Terminus Site of Grace. From here, head southwest and into the graveyard. Here, in this graveyard, you'll find a pot-bearing shade. Defeat the shade and it will drop a Scadutree Fragment. From the 3-path cross Site of Grace, head northwest and across Elec Great Bridge. Here you'll come to a Mesmer Soldier Encampment and the Castlefront Site of Grace. At the encampment, and just in front of the Site of Grace, is a Statue of Marika along with another Scadutree Fragment. From the Castlefront Site of Grace, head along the southwest path and eventually you'll come to the Pillar Path Cross Site of Grace. Here you'll find Tiolier, another Miquella Cross, and another Scadutree Fragment. Our next Scadutree Fragment is in the Legacy Dungeon Belurat Tower Settlement. Progress through the dungeon and to the small private altar Site of Grace. From here, you're going to wrap up the staircase and head up the ladder where you find the storeroom key. From here, head up the stairs, then to your left and back down the stairs. To your left, you'll see a staircase down, and to your right, an opening with a bunch of scorpions and a pile of rubble. Jump into the pile of rubble, and you'll find a somewhat hidden room. Progress through this room, and you'll find yet another Miquella Cross, along with another Scadutree Fragment. To the east of the 3-path cross Site of Grace, and just east of the Castlefront Site of Grace, is the optional Legacy Dungeon Castle Ensis. Progressing through this dungeon will naturally bring you to the Castle Ensis Checkpoint Site of Grace, a Miquella Cross, and a Scadutree Fragment. Our next set of Scadutree Fragments can be found at the Cerulean Coast. To reach the Cerulean Coast, you'll need to head south from the Castlefront Site of Grace and Gravesite Plain, and eventually, you'll find 2 different paths that can bring you down and into the Elec River Cave. Head south along the Elec River and continue dropping down along the waterfalls until you reach the end of the stream along with a Furnace Golem. Just past the Furnace Golem, you'll find the stunning Cerulean Coast. From the main Site of Grace, head south and you'll find the map fragment for the region, then continue heading south past this and up the hill. You'll come to the Cerulean Coast Cross Site of Grace, another Miquella Cross, and another Scadutree Fragment. Head west from the Cerulean Coast Site of Grace, and you'll come to the Cerulean Coast West Site of Grace. From here, head northeast into the canyon, and as you wrap back to the northwest, hug the northern wall. You'll find a cave, and in it, on a dead body, another Scadutree Fragment. Our next Scadutree Fragment can be found in the Legacy Dungeon, the Fissure. To get here, from the Cerulean Coast Site of Grace, or Cerulean Coast Cross Site of Grace, head south and across the giant coffin onto the southern tip of the Cerulean Coast. You'll find a giant fissure you can drop into. Do so and progress through the dungeon. Very early on, you'll find the Fissure Cross Site of Grace along with the Miquella Cross and a Scadutree Fragment. Next up, Charo's Hidden Grave. To reach Charo's Hidden Grave, you'll have to first find the Dragon's Pit dungeon. This dungeon can be found south of the Castlefront Site of Grace and along the path past Egon and the Pillar Path waypoint. Drop down into the pit and finish the dungeon. Instead of returning to the start, you'll find a door leading to the Dragon's Pit Terminus and a new route into the Jagged Peak. From the start of the Jagged Peak, where you find your first dragon, head to the path south and you'll find the Grand Altar of Dragon Communion Site of Grace. From here, you're going to need to hop over the giant dead dragon you're on and you'll reach Charo's Hidden Grave. Head north along the stream of Charo's Hidden Grave, then take the lower route to the west and you'll find the Charo's Hidden Grave Site of Grace. Further west, taking either the upper or lower route, you'll find a pond with a hippopotamus in it. Defeat the hippo, and you'll be rewarded with it dropping a Scadutree Fragment. After encountering your first dragon at the Jagged Peak, if you take the route north, you'll come to the foot of the Jagged Peak Site of Grace. Continue along the path and you'll fight a Jagged Peak Drake along with finding Egon yet again. Use the Spirit Springs to continue along the Jagged Peak path and wrap around south along the Jagged Peak path and past the boulders. Just under where the boulders were dropping from, you'll find a dead body clutching onto a Scadutree Fragment. Once you finish Castle Ensis, simply head north and you'll come across the Highroad Cross Site of Grace, Needle Knight Letta, Hornscent, and another Miquella Cross with yet another Scadutree Fragment. Alternatively, if you chose to take the alternate route around Castle Ensis, simply head to this location on your map once you reach Scadu Altus. From the Highroad Cross Site of Grace, if you head west and around the outside of the river, you'll find the Scadu Altus West Site of Grace. Head north from here and you'll come to the Church of the Crusade. In front of the Statue of America, you'll find two more Scadutree Fragments. Heading north from Castle Ensis and the Highroad Cross Site of Grace, you'll come to a Furnace Golem and Mesmer Soldier encampment that are all guarding the front of the Shadow Keep. Here, along one of the gate walls, you'll find another Scadutree Fragment. I think there might have been a America statue marking this spot too, but my Furnace Golem destroyed it if there was. From the Highroad Cross Site of Grace, head east and you'll find the Moorth Ruins, the Moorth Ruins Site of Grace, Dryleaf Dane, a Miquella Cross, and of course, with that, a Scadutree Fragment. Head south from the Moorth Ruins Site of Grace towards the giant fissure in the middle of the village. Rather than dropping down, wrap around to the south side of the fissure and you'll find a pot-carrying Shade. If you defeat the Shade, he'll drop a Scadutree Fragment you can pick up. From the Moorth Ruins Site of Grace, head to the Mesmer Army encampment just northwest from the Site of Grace. Here, after defeating the soldiers, you'll find a Statue of America, and in front of it, a Scadutree Fragment. If you head due north from the Moorth Ruins, you'll come to a little pond with a cave in front of it that leads to Rauh Ruins. At the base of this cave is a Statue of America with a Scadutree Fragment in front of it. Heading south along the path from the Moorth Ruins, you'll be able to reach the Fort of Reprimand. However, before that, there's an area where Mesmer's army is duking it out against the Ghost Flame Dragon. Around this area, you can find a Spirit Spring. Travel around the back of the cliff where the Spirit Spring is located to break the rock pile that activates it and hop up the spring. From here, travel southeast and you'll find the Scaduview Cross Site of Grace, a Miquella Cross, and a Scadutree Fragment. From Scadu Altus and Highroad Cross, head directly north to the front entrance of the Shadowkeep. Here you'll find the Golden Hippopotamus boss fight. Defeat the Golden Hippo, and you'll be rewarded with 2 Scadutree Fragments. The next Scadutree Fragment can be found in the Specimen Storehouse of the Shadowkeep at the Storehouse 4th floor Site of Grace. There are 2 ways to reach this. The first one is the bottom route starting at the 1st floor. If you haven't moved the specimens, take this route up and climb up across the specimens to reach the Site of Grace. If you come from the alternate route, you'll have to work your way down from the 7th floor and wrap around outside where you'll find the entrance. Here you'll find the Site of Grace, a Miquella Cross, and a Scadutree Fragment. You'll find another Scadutree Fragment in the Shadowkeep's Dark Chamber. To reach this, you'll need to first find the lever in the Specimen Storehouse that raises the various specimens. The switch can be found by starting at the 7th floor Site of Grace that has Redmane Freya in it. Leave the chamber, head down the stairs 1 flight, then continue forward and underneath the hanging specimen that has a revered Spirit Ash on top of it. Here you'll reach a dead end with a switch you can pull. So, pull the switch, watch the specimens rise up, then climb up along the specimens to reach a new portion of the Shadowkeep. This will take you to the Dark Chamber Site of Grace and another Scadutree Fragment in front of a small statue of America. Another Scadutree Fragment in the Shadowkeep can be found in the Church District. To reach the Church District, you'll have to travel from Bonnie Village north to the Cathedral of Manus Matir and into the back entrance to the Shadowkeep. If you haven't found this path, you'll need to start at the Moorth Ruins. If you follow the path down the Moorth Ruins, but instead of heading right towards the main giant fissure you see, head to the left, you'll find a hidden drop-down you can take that leads directly to Bonnie Village and a new portion of the map. Following the path past here will get you to the Church District entrance Site of Grace. From here, platform your way forwards and slowly work yourself to the roof of a portion of the Shadowkeep where you'll be able to drop down and inside. Here you'll find a statue of America with an item on top, but the statue is partially covered in water. While it's possible you can jump onto the statue from here, honestly, I didn't test it. Instead, first I drained the water from the area. To do this, one of the first paths you find that leads outside of the building you dropped into will take you around to the left. Take this route, climb up the various stairs, and then climb up the ladder at the end, where you'll find a lever you can pull. Pulling the lever will drain the water. Now, you can safely return back to the Statue of America, jump on top, and you'll find a Scadutree Fragment. There is yet another exit out of the Shadowkeep. This time, we'll be finding the Backgate Site of Grace. To do this, start at the Storehouse back section Site of Grace. If you haven't found it yet, you can reach this from the Church District, taking the same route I described for Scadutree Fragment number 29. From inside the building you can drop into, there's an exit that will lead to an elevator up, taking you into the Specimen Storehouse and the Storehouse back section Site of Grace. Okay, now that you've found the Storehouse back section Site of Grace, take the ladder in front of you up to the upper portion of the Storehouse. Now take a right and head up the staircases to the Tome Shelf section. Once you reach this, hug the wall and you'll find a broken section of wall you can jump over that will take you just outside of the Storehouse. Take this route up and back into the Storehouse to reach the Storehouse Loft Site of Grace. Make your way through the loft, and you'll eventually find a couple of elevators down. Take these down, and you'll reach another exit from the Shadow Keep and the Shadow Keep back gate Site of Grace. From here, instead of heading outside, head into the room to your right, or east of you. This room contains a statue of America and a Scadutree Fragment in front of it. After you find the Shadow Keep back gate Site of Grace, you'll also find the boss Commander Gaius. Defeat Commander Gaius, and you'll be able to find the Scaduview Site of Grace in his former boss chamber. To the northwest of his boss chamber, you'll find a route through and to the super cool structure that houses the Scadutree Chalice. Head here and you'll reach the Scadutree Chalice, which has a whopping 5 Scadutree Fragments on the roots in front of it. Our next Scadutree Fragments can be found by killing Hippos near the Recluses River. If you haven't found this yet, it will be vital to find for this and the following Scadutree Fragments I'll be describing how to get. To reach the Recluses River, you'll have to start from the Shadow Keep. From the base of the Shadow Keep, at the main gate plaza Site of Grace you'll unlock after defeating the Golden Hippo, head to your right and up the stairs. Instead of continuing forward and heading into the Specimen Storeroom, hang your right, and along the backside of the swing, you'll find a ladder that will take you down. Take the ladder down and go behind the little waterfall and down the ladder, and you'll find the Domain of Dragons painting. To the right of this painting is an illusory wall. So whack the illusory wall and you'll find a coffin you can now take down, which will take you to the Watering Hole Site of Grace. From this Site of Grace, you now have access to the ruins of Unte, the Recluses River, and an entire new portion of the map. From the Recluses River, work your way down to this pond the river stream creates that I have outlined on the map. Here, you'll find another Hippopotamus, and by defeating it, another Scadutree Fragment. And hey, as it turns out, there's 2 Hippos here, so defeat the second one, and you'll earn your second Scadutree Fragment in this area. From the Recluses River downstream Site of Grace, you'll notice that there's a glowing Gravebird altar to your north, across the way from you. Head north and around the path and you'll be able to reach this area. Near the altar, you'll be able to find a drop-down that will net you the Dryleaf Seal. From here, continue dropping down north and into the river itself. Head north along the river, past the Miranda Blooms, and eventually you'll reach the portion where the waterfall is flowing. It's here, at the end of the line, you'll find a coffin with a Scadutree Fragment in it. You'll now be right next to the Recluses River upstream Site of Grace, just underneath it and to the west. For the next set of Scadutree Fragments, you'll need to have found the Abyss. If you haven't yet, here's how. First, you need to find and access Recluses River. If you skipped it, I describe how to get here in the Scadu Altus Recluses River Hippo portion of the video. Next, you'll need to find the Dark Light Catacombs. To reach the catacombs, start at the Recluses River downstream Site of Grace. From here, drop down the path in front of you and continue dropping down past the Village of Flies, until you've dropped as far as you can. Then head to this portion of the map and you'll find the Dark Light Catacombs. Get to the bottom of the dungeon and defeat the boss Jory Elder Inquisitor. For doing so, you'll discover the Forsaken Graveyard Site of Grace and have finally made it into the Abyss. From here, head south past the Woodland Trail Site of Grace and continue southeast to reach this portion on your map and the Church Ruins. Here at the Church Ruins, you'll find an altar with 2 Scadutree Fragments in front of it. From the Abyssal Woods Site of Grace, head north. You'll find a corpse against a tree, and on the corpse, a Scadutree Fragment. North of Scadu Altus are the Rauh Ruins. There's both an upper and lower portion to the ruins, and for this Scadutree Fragment, we're going to need to go to the lower portion. To get here, first you'll need to find the Moorth Ruins site of grace on the Scadu Altus. From the Moorth Ruins, if you travel north, you'll find a cave with the America statue and Scadutree Fragment located here on the map. Once you've found the cave, travel through it and you'll reach a poison area on your map. Head west from here and you'll reach the Rauh base, as well as the Site of Grace. From this Site of Grace, continue southwest and eventually you'll reach the Templetown Ruins, where you can also find a Site of Grace. Travel around the Templetown Ruins and you'll be able to find a hole in the wall that lets you access the inner portion. As soon as you enter, you'll notice that there's a body hanging off of a ledge with an item on it. Using Torrent, you can jump onto this portion of the village, nab the item, and you'll find it's a Scadutree Fragment. For the next set of Scadutree Fragments, you'll need to reach the upper portion of the ancient ruins of Rauh. To do so, from the Shadow Keep, once you reach the first floor of the Specimen Storeroom, head west and you'll find an elevator down that eventually leads to an exit, taking you to the Viaduct Minor Tower Site of Grace. From here, you'll need to reach this pond on your map. To do so, there are multiple routes. The one that I happened to take was by heading south outside of the Viaduct Minor Tower. On this ledge, you'll find an elevator that will take you into the ruins. Now, take this little window outside of the ruins, and you'll be on the correct level to properly head to the pond. Simply take the stairs down, and you'll reach a pond containing a hippopotamus. Defeat the hippo, and it will drop a Scadutree Fragment. From the Viaduct Minor Tower Site of Grace, head west and into the ruins. If you head down these ruins, either by taking the stairs, or by dropping down in this hole, you'll find an area with a bunch of shades. From here, the most direct route is through a window path that takes you into a room with a bunch of giant scorpions. Past this room, you'll find a larger room with a cursed blade and a pot-bearing shade. Alternatively, to reach the same area, from that room with all the shades I mentioned earlier, you can open a door. Open this door, follow the path, and drop down on top of the safe Spirit Spring. From this drop down, you'll find an alleyway with another Spirit Spring. This Spirit Spring will take you up to the exact same area and directly to the pot-bearing shade I mentioned. Defeat this shade and it will drop a Scadutree Fragment. From the Viaduct Minor Tower Site of Grace, head west and into the ruins. You'll need to take the ruins all the way down to the bottom, and you'll be able to exit out to find the Rauh Ancient Ruins East Site of Grace, a message from Dane, a message from Letta, a Mikola Cross, and with that, a Scadutree Fragment. From the Rauh Ancient Ruins West Site of Grace, head further west and you'll find a staircase up into more ruins. Take these staircases up past the various shades and you'll find a large room containing a curse blade. Directly in front of you, at the end of this room, is a large throne, or altar, with the Scadutree Fragment in front of it. Enir-Ilim is the final legacy dungeon of Shadow of the Erdtree. It also just happens to be sitting right above Belurat Tower Settlement. And as it turns out, there's a relatively hidden way to drop down from Enir-Ilim back into Belurat. To do so, first you'll have to find the first Rise Site of Grace. Progress through the dungeon, as you would normally, and before the Spiral Staircase Site of Grace, you'll notice a staircase you can take down to find Inquisitor Spirit Ashes. If you head outside of this, you'll find a broken staircase you can drop down onto. While this staircase might seem like a dead end, you'll be able to drop down onto the nearby wall, cling to it, and wrap around along the side of it. Continue taking this down, and you'll reach a platform with 10 Golem's Great Arrows. From here, you'll have to jump across a pit and into a nearby window. Doing so will drop you down into a hidden portion of Belurat Tower Settlement. Continue forward, and you'll find a Scadutree Fragment in front of a covered-up statue. When you reach Enir-Ilim, the first main site of grace you'll find is First Rise. Simply continue the dungeon as you normally would, and eventually you'll come to the Spiral Rise site of grace, a Miquella Cross, and a Scadutree Fragment. From the Spiral Rise site of grace, head up and out of the window. Hop across the rooftops until you find a staircase you can travel up, and to your left, an entrance to a room with a revered spirit ash. If you instead take the route in front of you up, this will take you up the side of another tower. Once you reach the top of this tower, turn around, enter the room behind you, and you'll find an altar with a Scadutree Fragment on top of it. After the Spiral Rise site of grace, continue through the Enir-Ilim Legacy dungeon as you would normally, and eventually you'll reach the Cleansing Chamber Anteroom site of grace. Within this room, you'll find the final Scadutree Fragment. I hope this guide helped you find any Scadutree Fragments you missed, and the directions were clear enough for you to easily find them. I actually wrote another guide on every revered Spirit Ash for GameSpot, so make sure to check that if you need help finding any of those. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.